All of us go down to the dust, yet even at the grave, we make our song. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. Amen. You may be seated. Yesterday, I had a little visit to my folks' home in anticipation of my father's 92nd birthday, which is today. So we try to celebrate that as much as possible. But on the way home, I decided to make a quick trip to Byerly's, my neighborhood Byerly's, even though I needed like 2 things. I've gotten to know some of the bakery folks there, which says a lot about my diet, but anyway. And as I walked towards the bakery, I heard my name, and I turned around and saw my friend Linda. Linda's someone I've gotten to know over the last several years. But Linda looked very different. She looked markedly thin to me. So I asked if she was okay. She stepped out from behind the counter and shared that her 54-year-old husband fell ill in June and passed away on August 3rd. She shared some of the trauma of the experience, from not qualifying for hospice care 2 days prior to his death, the teeth-grinding shivers and the pain of infection, and so on. And it was just a coincidence that this just happened to be her first day back and her first hour back in 4 months. I took a big breath and sighed and told her how sorry I was and held her while she cried into my shoulder. We exchanged a few more words, and at some point, I may or may not have uttered a few cuss words, which caused her to chuckle a little bit, and she said that was absolutely perfect. It's what she needed to hear. Her coworker approached and joined in the hug. And in typical Mary Beth style, her coworker asked how long I had been a priest, to which I answered, "How did you know I was a priest?" She pointed to my collar. And I promised to light a candle in memory of her dear husband, Daniel, this evening. As I reflected on this momentary thin place in the middle of the grocery store, I thought, my master's degrees, my decades as a clinician, seminary training, CPE, internship, and the rest are all important. But I think they all pale in comparison to the outpouring of grace that filled us up and spilled over on anyone else who was there. Grace. I believe that in response to grief, loss, longing, and pain are important. But when our responses are just cerebral and on the surface, we will come up short every single time. And I also believe that while grace is 100% free and 100% available, it can be really tricky for us to get out of the way of grace, which we have to do, and let go of the illusion of control. This very service is called a Requiem Eucharist for all faithful departed. All faithful departed. I don't know about you, but talk of saints and faithful people and the great cloud of witnesses can make me feel pretty unqualified for any of those descriptions. Grace. It's why the collect for purity feels really vital tonight. Oh God, cleanse the thoughts of our hearts. We empty ourselves of the notion that we've got this, and we can open ourselves up to the one who does have this. Grace and grief. Grace and grief meet beautifully in the story of Lazarus' death. I was able to preach on this Saturday at a funeral. I used to go to Sunday school every week, and I remember the very first Sunday that we were instructed to memorize a verse. I know it's hard to believe, but I was a little bit of a smart aleck then. And so I found the very shortest verse in the Bible, 2 words, Jesus wept. Done and done. I think I heard my Sunday school teacher's eyes roll in the back of his head from where I was sitting in the back of the room on a little tiny plastic chair. But the phrase, Jesus wept, has stuck, and I have pondered it a lot since then. According to my Sunday school teacher, Jesus knew he was going to heal Lazarus. So why weep? We know that Martha met Jesus with tears as they approached the grave. That when he saw the grave and saw people crying, his humanity reached out to them, and he had a deeply physical response of weeping. People said, "See how he loved him." The tears are in response to the human and divine love he felt for his friends. He wept because of the fullness of what death does and what death takes away. And it pierces him to the core. He experienced what it is to be human, knowing that everything will die. Martha said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." You can hear the pain, the longing, the accusation. And then Mary says the same thing. It may just be me, but I'm pretty sure this wasn't done in a library kind of voice. If you had been here, my brother would not have died. But that's the beauty of grace. Jesus does not flinch with the anger, the accusation, even the bitterness. He weeps. He is with them. He is with them in their mourning. And then, of course, he heals Lazarus, which is really pretty cool, but a foretaste of what is to come. So tonight, we are gathered in community. How do we do grace and grief in community? First of all, know that you can't do it wrong. You just can't. Your response is not wrong. In fact, one of my favorite definitions of grief is, there is nothing you can do to make God love you more, and there's nothing you can do to make God love you less. Grace just is. Love just is. It's not dependent on our performance. Isn't that beautiful? I hope you all remember that really important piece. So in this place we gather, and as people of faith, we gather at the point of pain in the world and cry out to God. And the Spirit weeps and sighs and groans on our behalf. People, our job is not just to turn our backs and look the other way. This is why we gather here, to come around each other. We're going to read the creed in just a moment, and I want you to read the phrase, "We believe in the community of saints." Let that go deep into you. This community right here, those who are maybe watching or who will watch, the communities of faith throughout the world, and the large community of faith that has gone before us to a distant shore. But what about when we are all alone and we're not surrounded by grief or by a group? What does that look like? Excuse me. There we go. The passage in Corinthians reminded me of something, and I will close with this. There was a man named Horatio Spafford. He was a successful attorney and real estate investor, and he lost a fortune in the Chicago fire of 1871. And then his 4-year-old son died of scarlet fever. Thinking a vacation would do his family good, he sent his wife and 4 daughters on a ship to England and planned to join them after some pressing business at home. However, while crossing the Atlantic, the ship was involved in a terrible collision and sunk. More than 200 people lost their lives, including all 4 of Horatio Spafford's precious daughters. His wife, Anna, survived the tragedy. Upon arriving in England, she sent a telegram to her husband that began, "Saved alone, what shall I do?" He immediately set sail for England, and at some point during his voyage, the captain of the ship, aware of the tragedy, summoned Horatio to tell him that they were now passing over the spot where the shipwreck had occurred. As Horatio thought about his daughters, words of comfort and hope filled his heart and mind. He wrote them down, and they have since become a well-beloved hymn. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to know, it is well with my soul. And the last verse from Corinthians. And Lord, haste the day when my faith shall be sight, the clouds be rolled back as a scroll. The trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul. Amen.